purposes of the meeting is to kind of look at some things. Although all things in fact, both of our offices, the topics that we're going to look at right now are things that where we need us that both have input on. I think it's the mental health issue, if I can write down.
Right, there are two items on the agenda. We should have gotten
I gave PAC that Joanne.
And I probably didn't grab one. So the first topic is, do we have an acceptance of the agenda? No additions, changes?
no changes.
Okay, public comment section. This is the time and place for the general public to address the program advisory committee. I would add FAC, finance committee. State law prohibits the committee from acting on any issue not previously included on the agenda. Members of the committee may choose to take notes and respond briefly after public comment is closed. Items not on the agenda are addressed using a blue public comment request. Items on the agenda are addressed using the white public comment request. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker, with a maximum of 20 minutes total for each agenda item. Speaker forms must be presented to the administrative assistant prior to the beginning of the meeting. Karen, do we have any public comments, please? Okay, for joint business items, number 1, combined joint FAC meetings joint.
At our last superintendent's meeting, there was some discussion amongst superintendents as to whether or not there should be some joint meetings, both whether there should be joint meetings of the superintendents and the advisory groups, and whether or not there should be some joint meetings of FAC and PAC. By the fact we have our program meeting in the morning and our finance meeting in the afternoon, generally you guys come to pretty close agreements, and there's not a problem. But at our last meeting, you know, I had made the choice to move the item forward to superintendents, even though we didn't have a clear consensus from finance, because we had one from program, and I think the superintendents felt there needed to be some mechanism where both finance and program could talk on items. So I'd like to just get some ideas on whether or not you would like to go back to having some type of joint meetings. We had those a couple different ways. We had we could kind of do something similar to this, where we start in the morning with program items, have a time for joint items, and then in the afternoon move just into the finance items. And we also, in the past, one time a year, had a joint superintendent's program and finance meeting. Mm-hmm. So those are 2 things we've done. There certainly could be other options. Any thoughts on the matter?
I kind of like this. This seems to work. Is this an earlier time than FAC usually comes?
Yeah.
1.
1:30.
So this
1:30.
So this really, for them, it's a little bit more challenging. For PAC, it just seems convenient. So I would have to then defer to finance and see what they think.
That's also assuming that the PAC agenda isn't really long.
Yeah,
It's a little shorter
yeah,
today.
we're really trying to keep it short this time to make sure we wouldn't run over.
And there are also some finance meetings occasionally that are on PAC, and like today, there was some finance meeting stuff on the agenda that's also going to be presented at FAC. Well,
Right, and then we would probably just present that once.
I know in East Valley, we kind of toyed with options, and what seemed to work when I was last there was having FAC and PAC meet first together. So the items weren't duplicated, and then the business and fiscal people could go off to there, and then we could just stay behind. But
And would finance come back to the administrative?
no, I think it was the combined meeting. It was a combined meeting, and it happened first.
Yeah, we tried that last, maybe 2 years ago, and I think because the FAC-only items program were here for, they felt like they were so saturated with the finance items that they were burnt out by the time we got to just program items.
And it was when I was a director in one of the places, it may even have been Upland. And certainly the finance is important to me, it's not my specialty. But my feeling was, again, we started with finance, and we would sometimes spend 2 or 3 hours in finance. But then the finance people left and didn't stay to hear about program. And so for me, if we're gonna have joint meetings, it might be nice that we're all committed to learning more about each other's department. So that would be, if we're looking at having, spending our, as program people, spending our time sitting in a full finance meeting, then what is a terrible thing to say, but the responsibility of finance to take a look and to better understand program, so that when we're not meeting jointly, how do they hear that voice as they're making decisions? So for me, I kind of like this consolidated, where do we overlap piece, however that works. Does it need to start a little bit later? Could it start at 12 instead? If it's an hour, can we wait that long for lunch? So that you guys don't come and then there's a break before you meet again. That doesn't seem like a good use of finance times to be here at 11:20. I think we're going to be done by 12 or 12:30, and then you've got an hour of dead time over here. I think the intent is really good to have some time, a few times a year, where we're together and work. I just don't know how you schedule it.
Also, a little insight into why East Valley's works so well too, and Desert Mountain actually does something even different, but, because they don't have that many a year. But, things that are, you're not discussing process, you're just like, for instance, for the facility on the agenda for today, that's just giving information, that's sent out email, rather than be on the agenda, and, you know, to, in East Valley and in Desert, both of them do that. They send those out, Desert does it on a monthly basis, they send out a packet on a monthly basis of routine financial information that does not include any kind of change in procedure, just information. And East Valley does it as well. So, I mean, that's one thing that could help an agenda, you know, during a combined meeting.
Yeah, we may need to, I think the issue there is the superintendents. We try to decrease the number of items that are routine that go to superintendents, and even with that, some of, you know, we developed a consent agenda piece, but even with the other items that don't require consent, the superintendent still wanted it on their agenda. I don't know if, you know, we would have to work with them to see if they would like to change that process.
Well,
Emily, do you?
one of the things that's what I was going to bring up also, is what we do is on the routine transfers, like the regular transfers, the expat transfers, the ones that are according to procedure, like basically what Janet's talking about. What we do right now, the process in place is that superintendents want to have the approval of FAC and PAC basically to move forward with those, and they're just notification items to them. I don't have a problem, it would probably be a good idea, a lot of those items, because they're really just presenting what's there, unless you have some real concerns about it. They could just go on as information transfers, even to the finance and program, so there's not all that much discussion unless someone really has something that there was a concern about it. And then we have only 3 or 4 items that are really the finance items. So I think doing it right now, the process that we have right now, I couldn't do it via email as it is unless we change the process to do that. Because superintendents, when I provide the information to superintendents, they don't get any of the background information on those transfers. Only one superintendent does, because he specifically asked for them. So superintendents aren't getting those. That's the decision that was made by Sue. So that's why it's going to the finance group, and all of the program people receive copies of the finance agendas all the time. So they get the 2 packets. So if there's something that is of interest or concern to any of the program staff, they could go ahead and come to the finance staff. So that's kind of how we've been doing it, but program really hasn't come to any of the finance, or in the majority of the time. And so I'm thinking that the suggestion of having those items be just really kind of like a consent item that we're going to go forward with, you have all the backup documentation, I think that would be really helpful, and it would minimize the number of items on the finance, so when we do have the finance meetings, we could actually have them all together with the finance and the program because they're gonna be the items that really kind of need to be discussed with everybody anyway. So,
Mario, I know you're new to this system.
Ah!
So the few experiences you've had with joint meetings, what's your thinking?
The times when I don't remember how many that they were fully joint, but well, two things were going on over the years. One is that the PAC agenda would also get a lot of the finance information, and we would discuss that, and then the finance would have the same information, so it was a little, double duty, at least for people like me who were going both, and it was kind of, and then I agree that when we were doing the full meetings together, I think those were problematic, because I don't think finance was interested in the program, and the program with finance, even though we know we have we have to work together on some of those things, so those were kind of frustrating, and I think that's when we switched back to, also finance, we used to meet almost every month like we did with PAC after the PAC meeting, and then those finally got reduced to quarterly because finance felt they needed to meet all the time. I think it's valuable for the program to know its finance is doing, for finance to understand the program perspective, because it doesn't always work that way in terms of making decisions, that kind of thing. But the intensity of it can be a little overwhelming, and if there's a way if we're going to meet jointly, to have an abbreviated agenda that on certain things that we do need to have a joint discussion on, I think would be great. But to do the whole thing, I don't think it's really valuable.
So Mario, does it make sense to have a joint meeting that starts in the morning?
I don't know, I was listening to that, I kind of like that a little bit, because sometimes the finance doesn't have to be really long, because a lot of it is just, our dates and things, and this is, except there are certain discussion items like we were doing earlier. I kind of like that a little bit. Now, it could elongate our meeting, so we would have to be aware of that, depending on.
But would that mean that if FAC also needed their own time, that they would come back later that afternoon on the same day, so they'd have to make a trip home, if you were?
Probably not.
No, I would say no.
Because
Let's not do
you
that.
come from a distance. I mean,
Again, I'm just asking in terms of how much business FAC would need to do that doesn't include.
If we had a shorter, like we did this morning, if we had a shorter agenda where we could, we really could have had almost 2 hours of finance information as a joint meeting, I think that could work. And they are either on the front end or the second
The tail end.
But based on a normal tax agenda, I don't see.
Because we're not typically done until about 11:30.
Or later.
Well, that's why what I was saying earlier is to have the majority, it's the majority of the finance items are routine items. If we have those all lumped together, they're not gonna take a lot of time. It's really informative information that we're just giving information. And so a lot of the finance could not go away, but it would still be there, but it would be really kind of like a notification that this is what we're gonna be transferring in the next month or so. And then everyone would have all the information, but we don't really have to go into detail about it unless someone has any question or concern. And then that would speed up a huge amount of the finance piece.
So you wouldn't discuss those items, you would just take questions if there are.
That's what I'm thinking, because that's really kind of what we do,
Finance
so item
people.
by item.
In the beginning, that was non-routine.
Right.
The process of routine.
Right. So like the 50% transfers, the PAC transfers, the quarterly NPS, NPA transfers, the ones that are just in alignment with our procedures. Those ones.
And are we thinking that would be monthly, or that would be like 2 or 3 times a year? Because I think we used to do it like quarterly or something.
Quarterly, I think is probably sufficient.
Yeah, finance needs a few fewer times than the program.
And the joint meetings were probably fewer than, I think in the old days, again, FAC was meeting more often. And then we did those quarterly overlap meetings. Peggy, how about you? Because you have a lot of direct contact in both areas too. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of what we do in the morning that we do again in the afternoon. And because district directors leave and they don't have an opportunity to see their finance person before their finance person walks in, but a lot of times we notice that it's like the finance people will go, okay, I need to get with my program director before I can make decisions. So if it
works out.